Okay, so we're going to learn a Sicha this week of the Rebbe from the early years, from Taf Shin Yud on Lag BaOmer. Let's bring up the Sicha. Let's see if we get the page up here. Sharing the right page. Here we go. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so we're learning the Sicha from Lag BaOmer. We'll learn it over this week. It's very fabulous Sicha. The Rebbe spoke, and before the Rebbe officially accepted the Nesias, the leadership on Lag BaOmer, Tafshin Yud, which is about 5 months or so after the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. So Skashris Verbringen about Lag BaOmer, etc. So Pnimiyus HaTorah, based on what's taught to us by our rabbis, that Lika Midi Deloyer Mizbe'iraisa. There's nothing that we have that's not hinted in Torah. Meaning to say, even like we have Esther in the Torah Minayin, right? Anechi Haster Aster. So everything has to be hinted in Torah. The Muven is understood. Shagam in Yoni Lag BaOmer Merumas b'Torah. So even though Lag BaOmer happens after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the passing of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, but the fact that it's such a big Yom Tov, there has to be some sort of hint to it in the Torah. The Torah HaChasidis. In Chassidus, it gives us two psukim that will hint to us about the idea of Lag BaOmer, and the Rebbe is going to explain how the hint is connected to the message of Lag BaOmer. We have Ad Hagal Hazeh, that in the disagreement or in the final meeting that we know of Yaakov and Lavan. So Yaakov leaves Lavan, Lavan chases, and they meet and they come to some sort of agreement, and they make a gal. A gal is a heap of stones to be a sign that you don't pass this. You don't pass this bound. This is the boundary. Yaakov doesn't go east, and Lavan doesn't go west. They separated from each other, and the monument that represents this agreement is the gal. A gal is a heap of stones. Beis, a second pasuk that we have. So what's the idea? The gal is the same letters as lag. Gal and Lag, so it's 33. So the Gal is the sign, a hint of Lag BaOmer. We'll see what the connection is. We also have Gal Einei Va'abita Nifla'os Mitarisecha. Lift up your eyes and look at the wonders from Torah. So again, we have the word Gal, and like the Rebbe says, Gal is Oisis Lag. The Gal is the same letters as Lamed Gimel, which is the 33rd day of the Omer, which is a hint to Lag BaOmer. So from the fact that we find that in Torah there's a hint, clearly, two psukim that talk about Gal, which is Lag, of the importance, so therefore this has to be a message for us on the importance of learning and spreading the teachings of Chassidus. Lag BaOmer, which is the idea of Lag BaOmer, which is considered the Matan Torah of Pnimiyus HaTorah. Rebbe mentions this many times, that the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah of the Torah, the way it is, the revealed parts of Torah, the Galia de Torah. So that was on the 6th of Sivan, which we celebrate Matan Torah. The Matan Torah of Pnimiyus HaTorah was given with the passing of Lag BaOmer, the Hilula of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the connection to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai speaking the Zohar the night before, the day of his passing. And therefore, the Rebbe says that we're going to understand from the connection of these verses how they hint to Lag BaOmer how important it is today, specifically today, to spread the teachings and of the Zohar of Pnimiyus HaTorah Chassidus. The Rebbe explains the verse Hagal Hazeh or Ad Aid, that this heap will be a testimony. What is this about? Or Ad Hagal Hazeh. Nemar Kasher Lavan Hisig Es Yaakov Birad Foyachrav. This is referring to when Lavan chases Yaakov, like I said before. He reaches him. They have their there are tough words between each other. He's looking for his idols, etc. Afterwards, they took stones, and they made a heap. And Laban called the heap Yigar Shahadusa, which was Aramaic for a heap of stones. And Yaakov Karaloi Gal Eid. This is going to be a heap of a testimony. Hagal Hazeh Eid, this heap will be a testimony of our agreement to separate ourselves and to go our own ways, and you don't cross into my space and I don't cross into your space, with all the meanings of the word of space. I won't go to your place. We're not going to try to harm each other. We have different agendas. Yaakov is Yaakov, Lavan is Lavan. We're going to separate, and the monument that's going to be a testimony to this agreement is the heap of stones. And we have long memoriam of in Vayetze of the Mittel Rebbe, who's very much connected, as we're going to learn to Lag BaOmer, where he talks about the idea of gal. Why did they make a gal, a heap, and not a wall? It's not just because they didn't have time, but because stones are letters, and when you have the letters formed in the wall, so then it's like words that you can communicate. When you make a heap, it's kind of that really keeps things separate, because we have no language that we could talk to each other. It's just like a whole bunch of letters and words put together. The Rebbe continues, what was this idea that Lavan ran after Yaakov? So seemingly it was L'Ra, it means he was trying to chase him down. But Isa Bisfarm bring down, the Rebbe quotes Mesirus Nefesh 9 in Or HaMeir that says that Shatam Hamitihu, the real reason he chased him, was not even what Lavan thought. Lavan thought he's going to chase him down to harm him. Because when Yaakov finished his Avodah, the time he had to do and the mission he had to do in Charan, which was the city of Lavan, there were sparks that Yaakov kind of left behind, whether he didn't engage them, what have you. So Lavan pursues Yaakov to give him those last sparks that Yaakov didn't engage or didn't take with him. Lavan came to give it back to him, whether he was conscious of that being the reason or not. That's not the point. So like this, Charan is totally, so to say, empty of any sparks. Like the Jewish people left Egypt, it says they left it. The Gemara says they left it like a pond without any fish, and a storehouse without any wheat. And the Rebbe says this is similar to our times. That we're holding the footsteps, the heels of Mashiach. As my father on the previous Lavich Rebbe said, that Mashiach is standing on the walls of galus, of exile. That after all the years that we've been engaged in gathering the sparks, specifically in our galus and our exile the past 1900 years. What we have left is like when Lavan chased those last little sparks. Just like those last sparks that Lavan came to give to Yaakov. Then once we get those last little tiny sparks, will be fulfilled the promise that the spirit of impurity will be taken out of the land, meaning the whole world will be purified. The BS Mashiach with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our time. So the Rebbe says, because we're holding those last minutes, where we're getting those last few sparks, moving is understood. So we have to get, we need to use all our force, and therefore we have to reveal, in order to get these last sparks, the hidden secrets of Torah that is going to help us get over the line. The Rebbe says, in the generations before our generation, a person could have maybe pushed off studying Chassidus, uplegen. Uplegen is Yiddish word for pushing off. Alim de Pnimiyus HaTorah, the study of the inner secrets of Torah, which primarily is referring to Kabbalah and Chassidus. When the person will say that, why am I not studying now? Why am I pushing it off? This is not a study for me. This is a study for the righteous. Bali Madrega, people are holding on a certain level, the chulu, or other kind of excuses. This Rebbe says, though that's not an acceptable answer. It's not a true answer. wasn't just for the righteous. It wasn't just for the people that are holding a madrega, a high level. But it comes to our times. Leaving the angry part of the world. And we're going to redemption. All you have left is the last few sparks. Now there's no more time to push it up. We're holding the last minutes of galus. We're about to go into Gula. We have to spread chassidus not just to anyone, but even not just to the special people, but everyone, even the most simple people should be learning chassidus. As we see the previous Rebbe did and the Rebbe did. The Rebbe says it right away. We see this in the behavior of my father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. How the Friedrich Rebbe spread, and how much has that been from 1950 to now has been 1,000 times more. How much the Friedrich Rebbe spread chassidus in the later years. And the Rebbe explains, the founders of the teachings of Chassidus, the holy Baal Shem Tov and the Magidim Mesirus, his student, which was the teacher of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Alter Rebbe, they were effective in revealing the idea of the inner secrets of Torah to the Jewish people. That there should be a concept of learning Chassidus. Admar Azak in the Alter Rebbe, what did he add to this, to his teachers, the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid? He was affected with Gila, and he revealed it's not just the studying of it, but the comprehension of Chassidus. That everyone is able to comprehend Chassidus, even though that was an idea that was unheard of. The people, that even the regular person should be studying ideas that are Kabbalistic and Chassidic. And unlike the ways people thought it should be, which was that the tzaddik, Atikar Yichya and Yechaya, that the tzaddik gives over life. Means you just believe in the tzaddik, and the tzaddik will give you everything you need. It will feed you the life. And you don't have to put in your own toil. You don't have to try to understand. Connect to the tzaddik, and you have everything you want. The Alter Rebbe said, no, this is Chabad, Chachma bin Adas. Apply your mind. Like the Rebbe said in his first talk, I will help, but you have to do. So the Alter Rebbe said that it's an idea of comprehending Chassidus in general. The Friedrich Rebbe said that everyone could understand Chassidus, even the most simple-minded person, that maybe even in the days of the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbes afterwards, even the teachings of Chassidus were for the Bali Madrega. The Friedrich Rebbe says everyone could understand Chassidus. That's why we have it explained in all languages and explained in all levels. In our generation. Those days, Yiddish was the common language. Friedrich Rebbe printed Memorim, which was usually printed in Lashon HaKodesh. He's printed in Yiddish, so even the regular reader could understand it. Even for the most simple people, can't understand Lashon HaKodesh, and just the reading to them Yiddish those days was like English. But what's the reason? Because in order to get the last sparks, the leaf on to be effective, with bias, Mashiach tzedkenu to bring Mashiach. How are we going to do it? Through adding and spreading the teachings of Chassidus. And that's how we're going to bring Mashiach. Everyone has to study. So at this moment, we're not saying, say, this is my job, this is your job. Everyone is studying, using all the forces and all the tools that could possibly be available to us in order to grab the last spark so we can march on to Mashiach. Again, this is of course connected to Lag BaOmer, because Lag BaOmer is the teachings of this, is the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, Pnimiyus HaTorah, of the inner secrets of Torah, which were the teachings of the Rashbi, of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, which is his holiday that we're celebrating Lag BaOmer tonight. So so we know that the idea of Lag BaOmer, we understand the message that Lavan came to give Yaakov the last spark. So we see that interaction was connected to Lag BaOmer. What does it have to do specifically with the gal, with the heap of stones? The Rebbe explains, so here the idea of the gal is, what does Yaakov say to Lavan, and they say to each other? This heap is going to be a testimony that we don't cross over. But in order to go and to be mevarer, to elevate the world, and to get the last sparks, the one who's refining has to lower him or herself into the space where they're refining, and enclose themselves a bit in the clothing so you could interact properly with with what you're trying to refine. So Yaakov has to sort of say, get himself dressed up in the clothes of Lavan so they could have a common language. The person may think, if that's the case, how far do I have to go to make ourselves to have a common language with the person that I'm trying to engage with, what I'm trying to engage. The Gal reminds us, there has to be a separation. Although you're involved and you're engaging, you have a conversation and bagels and lakhs and coffee, and we're going to schmooze and have a little bit of a dvar Torah, but there has to be a Gal to know that there's limits. That we have to make sure that the one who is getting refined doesn't affect the one who's refining. Remember, you're the one who's mashpia, you're the person who's giving, and the person's receiving. You're supposed to affect the person's not supposed to affect you. If you're going to engage in someone, and the outcome is going to be that you're going to be affected by the person you're trying to affect, that's not okay. And that's what the Gal reminds us. The heap reminds us, well, 1 second, remember your position, remember what your mission is. That's the heap of stones. Yes, I'll get dressed, we'll have a common language. But the essence of me is not crossing over. And you're not going to try to hurt you. I'm not going to get affected by you, I'm going to affect you. The Rebbe explains, and this applies not just to a person affecting the next person, but to a person who's out there being mevar their space in the world, right? You go out to the world, you have a job, you have interactions, you have food, you have all these things. You're supposed to take and find the sparks there and bring them to holiness. A person has to be involved in the world. Like we learned yesterday in the Gemara class, when Reb Shimon Bar Yochai came out of the tent, out of the cave, and looked at and burnt the world up because he said, "How are you involved in the world?" That wasn't a derech tov. It wasn't the right way. You have to be involved in the world because that's how you get the sparks, which means achila, v'shtiya, v'demem, eating, drinking, etc. And then you refine your body, which is who you're being mashpia on. Your body and nefesh b'hamis, your animal soul, v'chelka ba'olam, in the place of influence. At the same time, remember that you're trying to affect the world and not that the world should affect you. And you have to have a separation fundamentally and within your mindset of the material and the coarseness of the world. Lieda, the person must know, he or she. The only reason you're engaging in these things is to elevate them. But the truth is you have no real connection to these worldly things. When you have that gal, that sign in your head that you know, I'm affecting the world's not affecting me, that makes sure you don't get affected by the world. On the contrary, the job is to turn the world into a vessel for godliness. As the Torah says, like Yaakov tells Leah and Rachel, that Hashem gave your father's sheep to me. It means what was Lavan's went to Yaakov. Yaakov was able to turn. What do you mean to Yaakov? To make it what's important to Yaakov, which is holiness and godliness. So how does a person have the mental focus and the resolve to create this heap that reminds and separates the person, that the person affects the world and not that the world affects you? That's why the gal is in the heap, because the Pnimiyus HaTorah is the heap, is that focus, is that flag, that sign that says, this is my mission to affect the world, not that the world's going to affect me. When a person studies the inner secrets of Torah, Chassidus, a person who knows there's nothing else but Hashem. How would the world affect me if the whole purpose is just to reveal godliness in the world? But the world is shaker, the world isn't true. So therefore, there's nothing else but Hashem. A person knows that the whole entity, the world is all godliness. And then you're effective that you make the world at a vessel for godliness. This godliness Mashiach until on the complete level. That will be revealed at the coming Mashiach. Like it's going to be when Mashiach comes, as the verse says, the whole world is going to see how the word of God, which is the idea of Einoi Mavadi, is in the world, and it's going to be revealing the essence of the world, which is godliness. So therefore, Chassidus is going to continue that everyone's going to see, and the whole world is going to see how it's really a manifestation of Hashem. That's one idea of God. That the heap is the chassidus that gives the person the focus and the understanding and never loses that focus, to know that you're supposed to affect the world and not vice versa. But another idea that we have about this gal, this aid, this testimony to remind the person, and through chassidus, that's the reminder and the understanding that there's nothing else but Hashem, and therefore you stay focused to do your avodah, not vice versa. There's also, the Rebbe says that gal nasim avadim, like I said before, what makes the heap? Stones. That Yaakov, his sons, and Lavan, they took stones and they made the heap. What is the idea of the stones? Like I said before, the stones represent letters. The main point when you make a gal is not the understanding. There's a point over here. Although we said before, of course, Chassidus has to be brought on Avodah Basaga, but in the effect, the Rebbe always says, the fundamentals is the stone is lifeless, which is Kabbalas Ol. And based on that understanding of Kabbalas Ol, that I'm connected to Hashem, and of course you open your mind to Torah. But not that you understand, and therefore you come to the conclusion that Einad Levadi. Einad Levadi is because there's a gal on the Kavonim, stones, Kabbalas Ol. This is the way it is. And then, of course, you bring in the this is the way it is, all the understanding. What is this idea to separate between the world, gashmiyus, holiness, and worldly things through the stones? What makes it? What's really the way to make sure that the person makes sure that there's a separation between the worldly things and kedusha? Is not because you understand it, so because that's what it is. That's Kabbalas Ol. Kabbalah is a zoy nicht anders. This is the way it is, and it's no other way. And therefore, I'm going to be effective on the world. And Chassidus shows me how it's Einad Levadi. It's not only because I understand it, because that's just the way it is. This is why, again, the heap of stones is connected to the 33rd of Omer. Ki in Yoni Lag BaOmer hu Sefiras HaOmer. What is the attribute that we're going to speak about tonight? Is the attribute of acknowledgement. Hoid is acknowledgement. The foundation of acknowledgement is bittul. Not because I understand. I acknowledge, this is the way it is, even if I don't understand. And in Hoid Guf, it's Hoid. It's the acknowledgement within acknowledgement. It's total bittul. It's not about that I understand it. Like Yehuda says, we've spoken many times that there's a Haidol, that's the beginning of the path, and then brings you to the Iyar at the end of the path. We start with Moed Anid, which is acknowledgement. It brings us to Shwan Esri, which is Yehuda. Meaning to say is that with all the things that you achieve with your mind and your heart, you never lose the focus of the Iyar. This is the way it is. It's never built. The foundation of your connection to Hashem and connection to Yiddishkeit is not because you understand it to be so. And if you didn't understand it, you have a different conclusion. The understanding of how you understand it, you're steadfast with the connection and the resolve that this is the way it is. That's acknowledgement within acknowledgement. That's the idea of Kabbalas Ol. See if we go a little further, which is the next Sicha. Yeah, the Omer Sicha. Again, this is the talk that Rebbe verbringt on Lag BaOmer Tafshin Yud, 1950. The Sichas Lag BaOmer Tafshin Aleph. The Rebbe says in the talk of Lag BaOmer of 1941. Omer Kvagdish Zman Admer, the Friedrich Rebbe said then, Lag BaOmer hu Sefiras HaTiferes B'Tferes. The Lag BaOmer is also Sefiras B'Tferes. We just said the Lag BaOmer is Hod Shevahod. The Friedrich Rebbe said it's beauty of beauty, which is one of the highest levels. Sefiras is Shem Avaya. How could that be? How could it be both? The Rebbe explains. Up here say that Sefiras HaOmer if we start counting from Chachma, from Chesed, Chesed, by the time we get to the 33rd day, we start from the highest of the Midas, we go down to Hod Shebahod, that even we penetrate the acknowledgement. But if you were to count Malchus Malchus being the first night, going from below up, so then the Lag BaOmer we're going higher and higher in our Midas as opposed to the lower. So then the Lag BaOmer turns out to be Tveresh b'Tveres. You can do the calculation on your own. Malchus Malchus, Yisoid Malchus, starting with Malchus Malchus, Yisoid Malchus, etc. Apiza Lag BaOmer Tveresh b'Tveres. That's the calculation. 27. Let's see if the Rebbe can help us a bit. Let's just look at Sicha Text here, where the Rebbe talks about this a bit more. What's the difference if we're counting the way we traditionally count, starting from Chesed downwards, which then Hoid is Lag BaOmer, or we start with Malchus? Malchus means the question is, where do we start refining ourselves? We start refining ourselves from our kindness, from our highest point, until we bring it into our action. Or do we start from our lowest point and elevate higher? So the Rebbe explains. So he says the difference is, and that's very same. If it's talking about milmaila lamata, starting from chesed downwards, is mitzadik eluim from the perspective of revelation. If we're talking about logically approaching it, that's all from above down. You're starting with reason. You're starting with your highest qualities, going down until you can affect your lowest qualities. But if you're starting with mata l'mayla, that's Kabbalas Ol. Why? Because how could you start with Malchus? With Malchus, your lowest quality, you still haven't touched your higher qualities yet. But why? Because that's the yoke. Means if you're running on gashmak, if you're running on what works for you, then you slowly go further into your most external attributes, character traits that need refinement. But how can you start from your most external if you haven't even fixed in the inside of yourself? Because with Kabbalas Ol, that's not a contradiction. And therefore, you're starting from the most external, which is Malchus Malchus. So what is the difference of Lag BaOmer, like we said before, is Hoid b'Hoid or Tveresh b'Tveres. Api Aseder de l'mayla l'mata b'Tveresh b'Tveres. Api Aseder de l'mata l'mayla shekasher Avodah hi ba'ofen shel hayda mitzat Kabbalas Ol b'Vad. Hoid b'Hoid. Aydeza dafka b'Hoid matachas ha'ila v'ayofi Tveresh b'Tveres. The Rebbe says like this, that it goes in circle. That if you're Avodah, if you're able to get to Hoid b'Hoid in the way of Kabbalas Ol, that's the true beauty. It means we're starting from above down. But when you reach the level of Hoid b'Hoid of true acknowledgement, you should know that that true acknowledgement is not humble as if nothing, but the true beauty of what you've achieved in your life is the ability to reach acknowledgement. So the Rebbe brings this into the idea of iskashrus, which the Fabrengen is going to be primarily a Fabrengen of iskashrus. Iskashrus means our connection to the Rebbe, to the Nasi Hador. The Rebbe gives us, the Rebbe gives every chassid the ability to perform. And of course, when the Rebbe gives, he's going to give it with a good eye. The Rebbe gives it with a good eye. The Rebbe is giving us the highest levels of beauty. You want to get Tveresh b'Tveres from the Rebbe, then you have to have the Hoid b'Hoid. If you have the bittul Hoid b'Hoid, then you're going to be able to properly take, like a person has an empty cup, then you're able to properly receive. Then you could really get the Tveresh of the Rebbe is giving you. The Rebbe is going to give you even if you're not worthy. You can't just demand from the Rebbe, you're not ready to do anything. You're not even ready to put your finger in cold water. The Rebbe has to give you everything. A person has to start on their own. Start with you working on yourself, accepting the yoke. You start with your limitations, and then the Rebbe is going to give it according to his level, and that's so much greater. Which is going to be much more than your Avodah, but you have to start with Avodah. When the Jewish people left Egypt, God gave everything to the Jewish people. They didn't do any Avodah. There was no effort from below. But once the Torah was given, that the Seder Shekol Yaram Tzrichim Laved Avodah, a person has to put an effort. And then you're going to get much more, but at least put in a little effort. Not that you're saying that you're going to get only according to that. You do Avodah and you're going to get from the Rebbe everything. You can do Hoid b'Hoid and you get Tveresh b'Tveres. Adacham super Medrash, the Medrash tells us, Ksher Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, famous idea that Chanina ben Doisa, biggest Malachim Shialu Aburoi Evan Gadol Yishleim. Queen Medusa wanted to make a donation to the temple, to the Beis Hamikdash. She found a beautiful stone. He was a very poor person. He had no money to help. That anyone should pay anyone to help him schlep the stone. God said angels. But the angels told him, you have to put a hand, a finger. We'll schlep it for you miraculously, but do some sort of participation. All he did is put his hand. It was not kilish schlepping. The next thing he knew, he was in Jerusalem. It means put your hand in, drop the Rebbe's and make it miraculous. But you have to put an effort. A person has to give over to the Rebbe's ideas, what the Rebbe wants from us, accepting the yoke. We're here to do what the Rebbe wants. It's not what we understand. That's why it's Hoish B'Hoi. What the Rebbe is going to see. The Rebbe sees. I say, our commitment. As I know, then we're going to see that from Hoish B'Hoi, from the lowest, from the most level of Vittel, we're going to have the most beautiful of everything. Right, we're going to stop here tomorrow, Mesirus Hashem. Maybe a little earlier, we're going to continue to learn this, try to finish the Sicha throughout this week. Have a wonderful day and a happy Lag BaOmer.